there seems to be a brand new Godzilla timeline, which is something that needs discussed. So from 1984 to 1995, Toho rebooted the Godzilla series with a new continuity of films that acted as direct sequels to only the 1954 original. So if you're unversed in what I'm talking about here, this meant that while the very first Godzilla movie ever made was still in canon, all of those cheesy sequels that had come out since were no longer a part of that timeline, and that these new films would be the only real things that newer stories would focus on. Toho ended up killing the main Godzilla from those movies in '95 at the end of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah in order for TriStar to make the first American version, if you remember that. But they later brought the Japanese monster back for Godzilla 2000, which caused a lot of fan speculation due to people thinking, like myself included, that it was a continuation of Destoroyah, with the then Godzilla Jr. taking over the role from what had been alluded to at the very end of the last movie from 1995. But this wasn't the case, and instead, that movie, Godzilla 2000, marked another reboot. However, there may now be a sequel series to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, and that entire subject matter is what is getting a lot of fans talking. What's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. Now for today's video, I wanted to go over the new Toho timeline that has been going on for the last few years. If you know anything about Godzilla movies, and it can get confusing, it's that they kind of get all over the place with their continuities, especially starting from the Millennium era with Godzilla 2000 onwards. But when it came to earlier incarnations of the monster, it was actually way more straightforward. If it came out, it was more than likely just a sequel. But that is up until 1984, when they made a point of saying that all the old stuff like Raids Again, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters, Mechagodzilla, that stuff didn't count anymore, and there was a new series, and they were only going to be sequels to the original movie. Now, I've gone on before in the past that I actually like the Showa movies, but they are far sillier. It's unable to really get around that, if you're being honest with yourselves. The Heisei movies from the 80s and 90s were serious, or at least more serious than they had been in a long time. Now, we broke all of those Godzilla movies down into eras by Japanese titles of the original, Showa, the next one, Heisei, and then Millennium, and now Reiwa, which is the latest and most new era that we've been in. The Reiwa era being the most unorthodox, by the way, with so far no real continuity for feature films in sight, and a bigger emphasis on other mediums like TV shows and short films. But when it comes to those short films, specifically the ones done by Gemstone under the Toho banner, it looks like these actually do share a continuity again. And they look like they're actually set after Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, finally, which left off on a bit of a cliffhanger all the way back in 1995. So the end of that movie not only featured the death of the mainline Godzilla, but it had all of that monster's radiation fall onto his deceased son, Junior, who was then revitalized and seen bigger and badder than ever, now fully grown, sporting his father's design. In 2022, Gemstone released a sequel to the 2019 short film G vs. G. That movie was titled Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex. Now, it started off with the end shot from Godzilla vs. Destoroyah referenced explicitly, like you can't really get around that, and it even brought back the actress that played Miki Sagusa from those movies, who was the main character that was in nearly every film from the Heisei era, and she even set up that movie's plot, Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex, by saying, "Long ago, there was a battle, and Godzilla has not been seen in many years, a quarter of a century in fact, which is around the amount of time it had been since the events of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah." Now, Miki Sagusa's character in the Heisei movies was actually tied directly to this Godzilla that we watched grow up in those movies, and fans have long speculated that he could have been either Godzilla 2000 back when that came out, or even the monster in Final Wars, but on both accounts, that wound up not being true. This, on the other hand, seems to be very different, and the plots themselves line up directly with the timeline where Godzilla vs. Destoroyah ends. In fact, it's kind of obvious that they're doing this on purpose, to tell you the truth, even having some of Godzilla's sound effects and powers mimic exactly what kind of unique abilities and attributes he had in those Heisei Heisei movies. This has led many people to believe that the Gemstone Pictures continuity of Toho's Godzilla is actually a sequel series to the Heisei movies. And so far, I don't really think there's much that disproves that. Now, I want to make it clear that this isn't exactly an official statement or assessment on the subject matter, and this could all just be done to reference those movies as a jumping off point before doing something totally different. But the updated versions of both Gigan and Megalon now, monsters from the Showa series that never got redesigned and upgraded for the Heisei movies, is another cool nod to the 90s back when Toho would take older monsters like Mothra, Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla, and they'd bring them into the modern era. Part of me wonders what they're gonna do with the anniversary of Mechagodzilla, by the way, who already got a redesign in 1993 for the Heisei movies, but they could also do one for King Caesar, who didn't show up in the Heisei movies at all. In Godzilla vs. Megalon this year, the Gemstone continuity left out Jet Jaguar, who got his own short film in the modern traditional Suitmation short. So they could very well update the Mechagodzilla 2 design for next year's movie and just have things even more upgraded than what they were before if they're going to go that route. But again, this is just speculation on the new continuity, and it does look like that is a possibility at the very least. The main thing to talk about though is the fact that Toho has begun to officially bring back references in a nostalgic love letter manner for their short films when it comes to the Heisei series. And they've even gone as far to say that these are kind of set after the events of the 90s movies, with the visual iconography, designs of the monsters, and updated designs of older monsters from the Showa films, which is a very big deal to fans like myself who really loved those movies and always felt like they were the more entertaining ones from Japan at the time. It was a big, discovery for a lot of us in America when they started putting them out in the States, because we hadn't seen new Godzilla stuff since Biollante, and I'm gotta tell you, it's pretty cool to get sequels to them if that's what this is. Now, what's even more cool is the fact that if you watch the short films back to back to back after Destoroyah, they kind of offer up exactly what Godzilla fans could ask for. I mean, there's little to no human plot, and instead there's a genuine focus on Godzilla just fighting other monsters, done with the most updated technology, blending live action effects with the Heisei design ideas in CGI. And this is kind of a big deal, and it feels like a true follow-up to one of the most entertaining Godzilla timelines ever made, which is exactly what they're going for here. It's basically take the Heisei movies and then just give them a short film series that are direct sequels. This is unlike the other films in that Reiwa era though, which include things like Shin Godzilla and the new film -1, which, by the way, they're not even connected, and neither are any of the other short films, which seem to share their own continuity by themselves, by the way. And then there's also the animated stuff from Netflix. In order to help separate the continuities, I've begun calling this one that we're talking about in this video the Heisei timeline, because I'm just taking the Reiwa and Heisei eras and merging the names together for good fun. It's a way I personally use to differentiate everything. You could also call them the Gemstone sequels to the Heisei sequels, but that's kind of a mouthful, and I don't know, these are still obviously done in the Reiwa era. They're modern, they're updated, so I just mix both names and call them the Heisei series or the Heisei sequels. Fans have long wanted to see a follow-up to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah because they've liked the timeline and tone of the 90s movies. I'm one of those people. This is honestly really cool to me, and it's something that I wish we could actually get a full-blown series, actual television series or a feature-length movie with. But look, I'll take this follow-up to the Heisei stuff regardless if it's full-blown canon to those films or not. We don't know for a fact just yet, but they're obviously trying to make you think that this is what we're dealing with. But look guys, these are all just my own thoughts on the subject matter. Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex, G vs. G, Godzilla vs. Megalon, these are short films that you could just watch on YouTube, and they're actually really fun. They take the spirit of the Heisei movies and just update them to the 2020s, and I enjoy them a lot. I would go as far to say that Godzilla vs. Megalon, the 50th anniversary movie, is probably my favorite thing Toho has done since Shin Godzilla so far. Super excited to see -1. I've talked about all this stuff on the channel before in the past, so check that stuff out guys. But hey, whatever your own thoughts and opinions on the Reiwa era of Heisei sequels, whatever you want to call that, whatever your thoughts and opinions are on this little timeline happen to be, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments down below.